Your dog finishes pooping. Then suddenly, they start kicking the ground like they're trying to start a tiny dirt storm. Grass flies everywhere. Dirt shoots behind them. Sometimes it lands several feet away. And sometimes, they even glance back at the ground afterward, almost like they're checking what they just did. Most people assume dogs are trying to bury the poop. That seems like the obvious explanation. But if you watch carefully, something strange becomes clear. Dogs almost never kick toward the poop. They kick away from it, which raises a curious question. If they're not trying to cover it, what exactly are they doing? Because this messy little routine turns out to be far more intentional than it looks. Dogs all over the world do this. Big dogs, small dogs, dogs walking through quiet parks, dogs walking along busy sidewalks. They finish their business, then suddenly perform what looks like a dramatic kicking dance. Sometimes it's just one quick scratch. Other times, it's an entire performance. Back legs flying, grass scattering, dirt spraying behind them. Then they pause for a moment, look around, and calmly walk away, often looking strangely satisfied, as if they've just completed something important. To humans, it can look random, but many dog behaviors that seem random at first actually serve a purpose. And this one starts with how dogs experience the world. Humans rely mostly on sight. Dogs rely heavily on smell. For a dog, scent isn't just a smell. It's information, it's identity, it's memory. Dogs actually have scent glands in their paw pads. Many dog owners never realize this. When a dog scratches the ground with their back legs, those glands release scent onto the surface. At the same time, the scratching motion disturbs the ground itself. Together, this creates a small scent signal in that exact location. It becomes one way dogs leave information behind for the next animal passing through. But scent is only part of the story. Dogs also communicate through movement. If you watch the kicking behavior closely, it's actually a very visible display. The dog stiffens slightly. Their back legs kick powerfully. Sometimes they pause between kicks. Other dogs nearby can see this happening. Imagine two dogs at a park. One dog finishes pooping, then launches into a dramatic kicking routine. Another dog is watching from across the grass. Even before smelling anything, that movement already sends a signal. Body language matters a lot in dog communication. Posture, movement, confidence. All of these signals tell other dogs something about the individual. The kicking routine becomes part of that visual message, a moment that says, I was here. But dogs don't all perform this behavior the same way, and that difference reveals something interesting. By the way, does your dog do this every single time? Or are they one of those dogs that simply finish and walk away like nothing happened? Let me know in the comments. Because some dogs treat this kicking routine like a serious ritual, while others barely do it at all. And that difference often comes down to personality. Some dogs kick lightly, others kick with surprising intensity. Sometimes dirt flies everywhere. Then the dog trots away, looking extremely satisfied. Behavior experts often interpret this as a kind of confidence display. Not aggression, not dominance, just confidence. Dogs communicate status through posture and behavior, and exaggerated movements can sometimes signal self-assurance. You might notice confident dogs perform the kicking routine more dramatically. Shy dogs sometimes skip it. They finish, then quietly move on, which shows the behavior isn't purely mechanical. It's part of how dogs express themselves. There's another detail many dog owners notice. Dogs often kick much more enthusiastically on grass or loose soil. But when the same moment happens on pavement, the kicks become smaller or disappear completely. That's because loose ground reacts to scratching. Grass moves, soil scatters, leaves shift. The surface visibly changes, but on concrete, nothing really moves. Some dogs still perform the motion anyway. You might see them scratching briefly at the pavement, but the movement usually looks shorter, almost like the dog is performing the instinct, even though the surface doesn't cooperate. This happens because many dog behaviors developed long before dogs lived in cities. Their ancestors lived in forests and grasslands, places where scratching the ground would disturb the environment. That disturbance made the behavior more noticeable. Modern dogs still carry those instincts, even when the environment has changed. There's also another reason this behavior may happen. Sometimes the scratching simply releases energy. Dogs often show small bursts of movement after finishing certain activities. You might see a dog shake their body after standing up, or stretch after lying down, or suddenly sprint across the room for no obvious reason. These quick bursts of movement help reset their muscles and energy. The kicking motion can serve a similar purpose. After standing still for a moment, the dog suddenly releases energy through their back legs, which is why some dogs kick enthusiastically, even when no other dogs are around. It becomes part communication, part instinct, and part physical release. And now it's worth returning to the strange detail we noticed earlier. Remember the question from the beginning? If dogs were trying to bury the poop, why did they kick away from it instead of toward it? Once you understand the behavior, that detail suddenly makes sense. Dogs aren't trying to hide anything. They're disturbing the ground around the spot. That movement spreads scent, changes the surface, and makes the moment more noticeable. So kicking away from the spot helps scatter the signal outward, not hide it. In other words, that strange little dirt kicking dance isn't about burying something. It's about marking the moment. Of course, not every dog performs the behavior the same way. Some barely kick at all. Others kick every single time. Personality plays a role. Environment plays a role. Confidence plays a role. Some dogs even develop their own little version of the routine. Kick once, pause, kick again, then briefly glance back at the ground before walking away. These tiny behaviors are easy to overlook, but they're part of the quiet language dogs use with the world around them. Sometimes, dogs take the routine to another level. You've probably seen a dog kick so hard, they accidentally launch dirt onto their owner, or send grass flying across the sidewalk, or scatter small rocks in every direction. And somehow, they always look extremely satisfied afterward, almost as if they just completed a small mission. From the dog's perspective, they probably did, because in their world, that moment meant something, a signal, a movement, a mark left behind in the environment. One of the most fascinating things about living with dogs is how many of their behaviors seem random at first. But when you slow down and observe them carefully, you begin to notice something surprising. Dogs are constantly communicating through posture, through movement, through scent, through tiny rituals humans rarely notice. That little kicking routine after pooping isn't just a messy habit. It's a small piece of a much bigger language, a language dogs have been using for thousands of years. And once you start noticing these small signals, you realize something interesting. Dogs have been communicating all along. Most of the time, we just didn't realize they were talking. And if you enjoy learning about the small things dogs do that suddenly start to make sense, you might enjoy the other videos on this channel too. Every week, we explore another everyday dog behavior that most people never really question. But once you notice it, you start seeing your dog a little differently. And sometimes, the strange things dogs do, like suddenly racing around the house in wild zoomies, have surprising explanations too. But that's a story for another video.